if you do that, your message is now going to get lost in your lack of generosity. Like, I've never seen a YouTube video of somebody who's like, dude, they didn't leave a tip, but they left this, and it changed my life, right? Like, I haven't seen those videos. I've seen a lot of videos of people upset, of people that are pretty angry that that happened. And it's because that waiter or that waitress, they don't just need the gospel. They also need their tip. They need their wage. They need both. It's one and the other. It's not one or the other. And I understand that maybe like the biggest pushback that could be expressed during a message like this is that it is easy for me, Nathan Shaw, to say to be generous because I've been very privileged. And it's easy for a lot of people maybe to say to be generous because they've been privileged. And I think you're right. Like it has been easy for me in my life to live a generous life. My privilege has allowed me to be quite financially generous in my life, along with offering up a lot of free time in my life to be generous, like with my time and my talent as well. In fact, like sometimes I think I see myself as like having such a privileged life that I'm like, I'm not generous enough. Like I should be doing more. Like that's really where I am. But here's what I want to say to that pushback that somebody might offer. I want to say that we all have something to be generous with. We all have something. There's not like a quota or a percentage that God offers that like you need to be this generous. Instead, what God wants is he just wants your heart. We can all afford to be generous no matter how poor we may feel. Notice that phrase doesn't say like, we can all afford to give our weekends. Because maybe not everybody can. Somebody might need to work a second job on the weekend, right? Notice that it doesn't say we can all afford to give 20%. Not everybody can. 20% is different for one family than it is for another. It just is. That's a fact. But we can all afford to be generous with something. We all have something to offer. In the book of Luke, Luke was a doctor who like researched the life of Jesus, and he writes down a story where Jesus teaches this concept, and it's very crucial to what we are talking about this morning. This is found in the book of Luke, chapter 21. And he looked up, and he saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw also a certain poor widow putting in 2 mites. So he said, he being Jesus, truly I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all. For all these, out of their abundance, have put in offerings for God. But she, out of her poverty, put in all the livelihood that she had. The rich men, Jesus is saying, weren't generous to the same degree. Okay? They gave more. But they weren't generous in the same way because God didn't have their hearts. God had the heart of the widow. That's whose heart he had. So when I say we can all afford to be generous, no matter how poor we may feel, it's because words like rich and poor, they just mean different things to different people. And we all have different needs, and we all have different expenses, and we all have different goals, and we all have different circumstances and experiences. And so this message is about giving what you can. This message is about giving what God leads you to give, because he'll lead you to give something. I don't know what it looks like for you to be generous. I don't know what God is asking you to give. But I know that Jesus wants your heart. He wants something from you because he wants you to be his representative on this earth. And he wants me to do so as well. When I think about why this is so important, I'm brought back to one other story. I've got one last story for you that really sort of changed the way that I saw generosity. And it was a few years back. My sister and I, we attended the birthday of my then girlfriend. It was her 22nd birthday, and it was also functioning as a going away party for her. She was going to be moving to another state to go to grad school, and so it was birthday and goodbye, and so it was sort of a big deal. The party was really fun. I dunked on a bunch of people in Trivia Murder Party. If you've ever played that, it's the best. Felt really good, right? But then at the end, we all started going around, and it was not planned. I don't know how it started. We went around and we started sort of just sharing like stories and like affirmations about our friend who was leaving and was not going to be a part of our lives in the same way anymore, moving to another state. A lot of people shared like how they met her. They shared funny stories about her. But also it was a lot of sharing about what she meant to us. And this period at the end of the party was like beautiful. Like it was incredible. It was just something that happened very naturally. But it went really long, and guest after guest started to share stories about the generosity of this girl, like this young woman. Like it was crazy. I can't get into all of it because I think a lot of it is pretty personal to the people who were there. But it was stories about her being there for them when they were at their lowest. It was stories about her literally driving all night to them on like one of those dark nights of the soul and like saving their life. It was stories of her paying for medical procedures that they needed out of her own pocket when she was a 20-year-old college student herself, right? It was unlike anything that I'd ever heard, and definitely unlike anything that I'd ever heard about a 22-year-old, right? Like it sounded like they were sharing the actions of like a venerated saint, is like what it sounded like. And it was instead just like a 22-year-old college student. It was a crazy, crazy night. And like by the end of it, like everybody's in tears, hearing just how much she had given of herself, while asking like nothing in return. Like a lot of these people were like coworkers who she didn't know very well, who she was just there for, and they became best friends because of it. And here's the thing that like really blew my mind about all of it. I'm driving home with my sister that night, and we're like talking about it because like we've just been blown away. We're like, she doesn't even know Jesus. Like imagine if she knew Jesus. Like, she saw needs of people, and she just started to meet them because the world will step up if the church doesn't. They will. They'll step in, and they'll help, and they'll meet those needs. But Jesus wants it to be the church. That's what he wants. He wants us to be his representatives here on earth. And I want, like, when I think about that night of that birthday party, that going away party, like, I want that to be my legacy as well. Like, I think, like, if I moved away tomorrow, like, would those be the stories shared about me? I don't know. I'm not sure. I would hope so, but I don't think I'm there yet, right? It'd be a lot more stories about me dunking on people in Trivia Murder Party than it would be about, like, driving halfway across the country to be there for my friend who's in need. When I'm gone, I want people to speak about me as having been there for them at their lowest. I want to be the call when somebody needs help, and it's 2 a.m, and they're like, who will pick up, and who will be there for me? Nate will. That's what I want people to think. I want to be financially generous, and I want to be that man not so that people talk about me, but because Jesus is in me. That's why I want to. We've been challenged to be rich in good works, and so the question becomes, how's that going? How is your generosity going? It's important to ask that about your church. It is. It's important to ask what is being done with those funds and where is that generosity, where is that giving going? But it's more important to be accountable to ourselves. How is my generosity going? Think about what generosity could look like for you. It's going to be different for everybody due to age, stage of life, what you have available, what your resources are. It's going to be different. If you're in here and you're a student, it might look like offering to help a teacher after school. That might be what it is. I know that was really big for me when I was a teacher and a student would offer. Not only like did it mean a lot, but it helped a lot. And it was fun. It was often very fun. I enjoyed those times with my students. That might be what it looks like for you. It might look like for you buying a meal for a friend. I have a few friends who I know they're living very generous lives because they're missionaries, right? And they're like local missionaries here. And so it's like, I always am going to like get their meal, right? I'm always going to pick that up for them because I know that I know that they can't always afford to go out to eat and stuff like that. And if we're hanging out, then I want to be able to do that for them. So you might have a friend where it's like, I know it would mean a lot to them if I bought their meal. I know it could help them out a lot. It might be helping out a neighbor with their yard because they're unable to get to it. It might look like helping a neighbor out with their yard just because yard work really sucks and it's more fun with somebody else, right? That might be what it is for you. It could be offering up your guest room for a while. It's for guests, right? It might look like having a guest. If that guest room has sat empty for a year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe that's what it is for you. Maybe that's what God is leading you to do. Maybe you have a friend or a loved one who recently had surgery, recently has been in and out of the hospital. It might look like making meals for them or buying them some DoorDash gift cards, right, so that they don't have to worry about cooking. That could mean a lot for them. And the cool thing about generosity, here's the really cool thing about it, because I hear all of these and like it's a little bit overwhelming for me because I'm like, oh, I can't do all those. Like I can't. And now I'm like telling other people about it and stuff. Here's the cool thing about it is generosity leads to more generosity. That's the cool thing is people are going to see that you're doing that and they're going to want to jump on board. Oh, we're making meals for somebody? Oh, I can help. Right? Like, let me get in on that as well. And generosity is so much more fun with somebody else. It's so much more fun, right? And generosity leads to more. It begets more generosity, which leads to more. All of my favorite stories of choosing to give and choosing to be generous, they happen alongside others. It's not always going to be alongside others. There might be periods of generosity where it's you stepping up, and nobody else will ever know about it. And that's beautiful also, right? There's so many examples that nobody will ever know of when you've been there for somebody else. But it's a lot of fun alongside somebody else. I think it's easy to look at the church, and it's easy to hold them accountable to be good stewards of what they have. And it can be somewhat more difficult to look inward to see if we are good stewards of what we have. That can be a more difficult thing. But I think that's the sort of another point that I want to make is that like we are stewards here on earth of what we have. It's not ours to begin with. It's been given to us by God because God is generous with us. And so everything that we have, no matter how little or no matter how much, that has been given to us by God, and he calls us to steward it well. And one of the things that he tells us to do is be generous with however little or however much we have. And so it's not ours, it's his. As nice as it would be to have my friends speak of me as someone who's generous if I were moving away or if I were in that same situation that my friend was those years ago, as nice as that would be, there's one other thing that would be far more important to have somebody say at the end. And that would be for God to say, well done, good and faithful servant. And I know that being a good steward of what I have is a part of getting to hear that at the end. And so I've got something that I want us to do now in service. I'm no longer a teacher, so I don't get to give homework at school, so I'm going to give it here because that's really why I went into teaching, was to assign people to do stuff. And so something that I want us to do now, and there's just going to be like a couple of minutes of just sort of like just quiet sort of thinking time. Something that I want us to do now is I want us to reflect on this question. Is there somewhere in your life, and I don't think there's a slide for this, so it's just you're going to have to remember it. Is there somewhere in your life where God is asking you to be generous? Is there somewhere in your life where God is asking you to be generous? And I'm going to maybe probe a little bit deeper as well. Is there somewhere in your life where you make excuses about being generous? Is there somewhere in your life where you're making an excuse and you're saying, like, I can't do that, and here's why? Okay? And so think about that, and then ask God to help you grow in that. Ask God, is there a way that I can grow in that? And I'm going to be doing this right now as well. I'm going to be doing the same thing up here. And it can be, there's so many different ways to be generous. It can be with your time. It can be with like skills and talents that you have. It could be financially. But is there somewhere in your life where God is asking you to be generous? And we're going to take a few moments to just quietly Think about that ourselves. And if you think of it, it might be worth writing it down, because I know I get in the car and I go to lunch after church and I forget everything that was just talked about. And so it might be worth writing it down as well if you think of something. And we'll just be quiet for a few moments. About you guys. But the moment of silence is over. It's done. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like God was pretty clear to me just now about what is for me. I kind of what he was saying to me is, I was like, where is it? Is it with my time? Is it with my skill? Is it financially? And something that he said to me is, he said, you're pretty good about giving financially when you have it, but you don't budget and prioritize having something to give. It's if I have something extra to give, then I'm good about giving it. But he's you don't set yourself up to have extra very much. And so God's calling me just now. He was saying let's budget more so that we always have something that we can offer. So making, sort of an account, or a sort of a personal benevolence fund. And I was okay, that's something that I can start doing. And so think about what that is for you. But that was God spoke directly to me about that just now. And so that was our homework here. So I guess that's not really homework. That was church work. So here's the homework is to sort of step out and do that. I put up a list. I've got a list of a few places where maybe you could start serving or start giving with your time. Because I think it would also be good for us to practice serving just in action, right? And so I thought of a few different places that we could do so. And so maybe just find somewhere if you don't already have that place where you can give. That first one is we can serve on a Sunday, and that's a way to be generous and to offer to help our local church. But remember, this is Monday morning Crossroads. That's our series. It's all about sort of outside of a Sunday. And so maybe that's finding a local charity. We have a connection center that meets at our Ogden campus, actually, the Utah Neighborhood Connection, that you can serve at and volunteer at. I've had the opportunity this summer a few times to serve there. It's a blast. It's a lot of fun. You can help at your local school. Local schools need help all the time. They need reading buddies. They often have food pantries that you can give to. They need crossing guards. They just need help, right? There's always a place that you can serve there, or just helping out a neighbor or a friend. But be thinking about, in the coming weeks, where is it that I can give, and where is it that I can serve as well? I'm going to close us in prayer, and then the worship team is going to come back up, and they are going to be, we're going to be worshiping together one more time, doing another song. And then afterwards, prayer teams will be available. If you're here and you're man, you keep saying be in the hands and feet of Jesus, but I don't know who Jesus is or something, I'd love to talk to you or pray with you about that if you're interested in maybe knowing more about Jesus. But also we're available to just pray for anything. At youth group, we'll pray for anything as small as a sick goldfish or anything as big as a sick grandma, right? From goldfish to grandma, we want to pray for all of it, and that's important. And it's all important to God and to his heart. So I'm going to close this in prayer. We'll sing a song, and then we'll close out. So, Lord Jesus, I pray that you can help us to be generous. Thank you for how generous you've been with us, Lord. Thank you for always taking care of us, that you're